We're going to be talking about how testing tools can help with the challenges of tomorrow's world. And in order to do that, I think we need to go through a few things. First of all, what do tomorrow's solutions look like? You know, what sort of technologies are we dealing with? What are the challenges that they face, or what challenges do we face in testing as a result of that? And then finally, look at how the tools could actually help with those challenges. So firstly, dealing with what these solutions look like. Firstly, and I know this is a bit sweeping. I mean, a lot of this is sort of my opinion and our opinion as a company. We see a lot of heterogeneous solutions, so combining a lot of technologies together. And I list a few down there. The mobile is still quite new and still presents some challenges. Cloud, touch, and things like natural user interface, you know, gestures and gesture recognition. Social media, of course, is fairly new, and Ajax and HTML5. What we see as well is often in organizations you'll have separate development tools that'll be dealing with different technologies, and they'll have different languages that they use, and also different development environments. So things like Visual Studio and Eclipse could be used to write Java and .NET. And what we get when we have these solutions using these different languages and different technologies is quite a rich tapestry of code. Also, process management tools. And what we get is this classic sort of silo specialization where individual parties use particular tools for particular tasks. So I put Team Foundation Server down there, and often it's aligned to source control, but it is so much more than that. Specialist tools for dealing with bugs, like Bugzilla, for example, or you know, HP Quality Center if you're dealing with test case management. Indeed, you know, TFS and Visual Studio has its own test management as well. But effectively, you've got these siloed, these specialization, almost in some cases best of tool for the job. But what about developing tomorrow's applications? What does that look like? And often we see shorter timescales these days, and people being more agile in their nature. And I say, you know, we've been talking about agile for a while, but we're starting to see it really being adopted now. And I say agile in nature because often these people developing are not actually maybe adhering to all agile principles, and maybe they shouldn't be in some particular cases. Also, continuous build and continuous integration. This is a sort of thing that we're seeing a lot now, and it actually forms a heartbeat of the project, and it furnishes, or in theory should furnish, the test team with a regular build that they can then perform testing on. So I had to pick an example of something that was fairly futuristic, and we've been working on a project with Start Judge Gill. The end client is Adidas, and the product is called Adiverse. So I thought I'd show you a quick video about that application.
Adidas design 4,000 shoes every season, but how do you fit them all in one store? Our solution was Adiverse, a unique footwear wall, putting our shoes at the consumer's fingertips. How does it work? It's interactive and intuitive, using PrimeSense cameras to react as you approach it and grab your attention. It knows your gender and will suggest the most relevant products to you. The simple search function lets you pick out shoes by sport, colour, price and best for. Each shoe is viewed in its own environment with sound effects, so you can experience it out running, training, playing basketball or football. We used high-level polygon 3D real-time rendered images that allow you to rotate and zoom into the shoes for close-up details. And you can find out more about your shoes, like what technology behind it does, how it's made, how high it's jumped, goals scored and how fast it can run, as well as what other people are saying about it. And then, when you've found your perfect shoe, just tap Add to My Selection and a member of staff will be alerted automatically, giving any extra information you want and making sure you've got the right size to complete your sale quickly and easily. The idea behind Adiverse is simple: increase revenue and improve the brand's image by giving customers access to a much wider range of products in a rich and engaging way.
So this is a solution that we helped to test, and as you can see, there's lots of different aspects to this particular solution. You've got the large touch screen, you've got a couple of cameras with gesture recognition and also gender recognition. And of course then you've got some more traditional software like the back-end retail side of things, and of course indeed the slate as well. So as they move a purchase down onto a slate, then they can go ahead and complete their transaction. This is an application that has gone live, you know, and you can see it in some Adidas stores right now. So that's what the that could be an example. I mean, that is us working with digital media, and that's one example of how, you know, modern technologies can be employed. But what are the challenges? And let's start with the business challenges. Businesses and the challenge to the business is they tend to be fast moving, which means that they want to get to the market quicker, you know, stay ahead of the competition. And that's absolutely the case when we're dealing with digital media. But it does mean that we are constrained by time often. So we're expected to apply the same level of quality but in a shorter period of time. The business has to make decisions as to when to go live, and it is their decision ultimately. The thing is, they often don't have the information on which to base those decisions. Now, testing produces a lot of information, and I definitely see it as our responsibility to produce that information in a consumable form for the business so they can actually make those decisions. Even so, they still expect the same high level of quality. In order, certainly in digital media terms, to protect the brand, you know, they're always looking to protect the brand. But in other sectors, it could be different. It could be about protecting reputation. What about the technology and process challenges? I put down there agile churn. You know, specifically when we're looking at our example here, we were dealing with the business and also creatives, and these creatives, they love to change their minds, and they often influence the business into making changes mid-flow. Now, if we're doing something like Agile and we're using maybe you know, Scrum, and we're locked down in a sprint, that sprint backlog should be sacrosanct. It should be locked down. But often we find these creative designers just coming in and making changes on the fly. So that can be a real challenge in terms of controlling that. Continuous build and integration means that the test team gets these regular builds, which exaggerates a problem that we've always got, which is regression testing. How much do we do? When do we do it? Those sorts of things. And of course, if we're getting these fast, you know, continual builds, then test automation is often thought to be the solution. The problem when we're using these new technologies is that the test automation tools themselves actually run behind the curve. They're not quite at the same level as the new technologies or the development tools themselves. And so that can cause us some problems. And the question we have to ask is, do we want to create new tools? You know, do we want to invest time and effort into creating new tools to deal with those technologies? In some cases, the answer is yes. It depends very much on what it is. Other things, you know, with regards to mobile and slates, things like tilt. You know, how do you simulate accelerating a device, or specifying that the device is in another geography without actually going there. Connectivity, and I know there's some tool vendors in today that can help with this, but there's you know, 3G, Edge, Wi-Fi, and the transition between those. What's the user experience like? How do we simulate that, and how do we test it? Of course, the siloed nature of some of the process tools means that they do produce a wealth of information, but the value in that information is lost in the complexities with regard to bringing it together and making it meaningful. So, you know, you may have bugs in one tool and tests and requirements into other tools, but bringing that all together to be meaningful can be quite complicated. And we often see people using spreadsheets and cranking things by hand, and it does cause some difficulty. Security, and not to forget security and performance. When we move to the new world, it's often overlooked with new technology, but it is very important how secure our application is. In the Adiverse example, when we're dealing with taking from the screen down onto a slate, we're then capturing customer information, what might be sensitive information. And how are we transmitting that back to the retail system, the back-end retail system? What is done wirelessly? Is that wireless link secure? You know, is the data being stored locally on the device? How is that being stored? Is that secure? But also you've got security when we're talking about things like cloud. If we're talking about cloud and we're talking about Azure, or we're talking about Force.com or Amazon EC2, whatever it may be, how safe is our data? Previously, when we were dealing with on-premise solutions, it was very clear where the data was stored, and organizations could put their own security policies around it. But as soon as we moved to the cloud, then where is that data being stored, and how is it being stored? These cloud providers will obviously give you some security in knowing that they've got robust data policy, you know, procedures. But of course, it's not just about them. It's not just about the infrastructure. Often, data vulnerabilities appear in the application layer. And that can apply to both on-premise and cloud solutions alike. So we shouldn't be fooled, even though these guys have good data security policies. We shouldn't be fooled into thinking that we don't need to do security testing. And what about performance? I mean, we talked about the different types of connectivity for mobile devices, but how are we going to test? How are we actually going to test that? And do we have tools available to do that? And as well with cloud-based solutions, how do we actually performance test those? And do we need to? We know that these cloud providers actually provide scalable solutions. But the question again comes back to, is the application architected such that it can take advantage of that ability to scale? You know, we've seen that quite a few times where it's just been assumed the fact that you know, Amazon or Azure can scale, and indeed they can, but the application wasn't designed in a way that it would, and so performance testing actually highlighted that. So that's really some of the challenges. Now let's look at the tools and how the tools can help. And what I'm going to do is just break it up into two separate types of tools as we kind of see them, which is tools that support the process and the application lifecycle, and also tools that support the execution. And I guess specifically there I am talking about maybe test automation and you know, performance test, whether it be functional automation or non-functional. So tools that can help support the process, or what we would like to call, test management tools, or, now we're moving to a world of application lifecycle management tools as well. But they need to support this new sort of agile way in which we're working. And so being able to do things rapidly is important. If we take, for example, Scrum, and we're just about to start a sprint and we're going to get into sprint planning, then how do we do that? How does test have an input into those kind of activities, and is it done in an efficient way? This is a screenshot of using Excel to help plan a sprint. This is using TFS 2010 and Visual Studio 2010. But effectively it allows the team to drag everything down into a spreadsheet, get in a room and work out what the sprint looks like and estimate all of the tasks. And maybe it could be used during the sprint as well to reallocate work to people depending on their loading. And then it can be loaded straight back into TFS. So this is an example of where you can use tools to drive a very efficient process. Now, I say ideally a single tool or a central repository, but this is all really about collaboration. And in this modern way of working, we're sort of expected that testers can develop and developers can test as well. Now, you may or may not agree with some or part of that, but the fact still remains that I believe developers ought to be, performing testing as well. So whether that be unit testing or even some of the functional tests, they need to be prepared to do that. And so having one tool that everybody understands and can sort of interchange is going to be useful in that particular case. Also, the collaboration aspect of that means that people can all collaborate within the same repository. Again, with the iterative development or the continuous build and integration, then reacting to change is important, and understanding the impact of change for testing is important. We talked about the regression testing problem, and if, for example, the tools aren't up to the job of doing automated testing, you can't test everything, so what do you test? And there are features in the tools that can support this. This is something that in Visual Studio 2010 they call test impact. And what a tester is doing here is accepting a build into the test team, is accepting a build from development into the test team, and with that, the tool is actually telling them, well, you've got two tests here that ran before, they passed, but as a result of code change, you need to think about executing these tests again. So what it does is it means that testers can be more specific about what regression testing they're actually going to perform. This is also a build log, which is showing the same thing actually down the bottom. This is what the developers would get out, and here it's showing a couple of unit tests that need to be rerun as well. Now this list here can equally contain automated tests, unit tests, and manual tests as well. Of course, the effective management of risks is important, and the tools again need to support that, allowing the test team to ultimately prioritize the test cases. So we make sure if we can't test everything automatically when we get a build, that we test the highest priority things first, that we take as much risk out of the solution as possible. And certainly Visual Studio 2010, we saw the spreadsheet approach before. You can use that same spreadsheet approach for managing the priority of tests as well. As we look to what the future is for testing, exploratory testing does start to play an important role, and I think that testing tools need to provide better support for this activity. Certainly when we were doing the Adiverse footwall, you know, we couldn't have possibly done that without exploratory testing. There were so many different ways through that solution that just pure scripted tests would not cover enough of the functionality. So allowing the testers to go off-piste, allowing them not to tread that well-worn path was absolutely key, and the tools need to be able to support that particular process in an efficient way. Now, Visual Studio 2010 does currently support exploratory testing to some degree, but this is a screenshot of vNext, which is the next release. And this is showing somebody doing an exploratory testing session. What we see on the left-hand side is what we currently know in Visual Studio as the test runner. It's a helper window that runs to the side and will traditionally tell you what steps you've got to execute and what the expected results might be. But in this particular case, what we've actually got is some information about what's being trying to achieve, what you're trying to achieve in this particular exploratory testing session. It's also in this particular case, because it's using a web sort of cloud-based application, it is recording the actions, which means when you've finished your exploratory testing session, you can then split up all of your actions into separate tests, and you can actually create physical tests out of an exploratory testing session. So actually supporting exploratory testing is going to become more important with these tools going forward. And lastly, on this one, I talk about providing information, you know, providing that business with the information that it needs to make the decisions in a quick and efficient way is key. And taking out this whole spreadsheet manipulation of data to bring that information together. And I'm just going to show a few screenshots. Some of these things will be very familiar, but again, this is all coming out of TFS. So we've got a typical sprint burn down, what's happening with the team, when are they likely to complete. This is one that we use an awful lot, and it's really, really useful. Stories overview, and this in one report shows you pretty much everything you need to know about the user stories within a sprint. You see the user stories on the left, and then you see the work items that are against that and how complete they are, effectively how done they might be. And that can contain work items that deal with developer tasks and tester tasks alike. Then you've got the number of hours remaining, and you've got the number of test cases. You've then got a percentage of how passed or failed you are on those test cases, and also an indicator of bugs. So in one report you have all of that information. And probably from a business perspective, the release burn down is actually very important. If you've got a number of release sprints before you actually get to a physical release. And this can show the business what the trend is like and how you're moving towards that. So now dealing with tools to support the execution, and even as we move forward, I think unit testing and test-driven development is still important, and still an important activity that developers need to undertake. The tools need to support the developers being able to do that easily. Certainly in Visual Studio, the unit testing framework is very easy for developers to use. And if you're moving to more sort of behavioral-driven development, then there are tools out there, add-ons, like, for example, SpecFlow, which is an implementation of BDD. That can be used within Visual Studio, is effectively a .NET implementation. The automation tools that run behind the technology, well, as you see, we're generally using a mix of technologies, and so it's important to pick your battles, and if there's stuff that we can automate easily, let's do that. And the difficult stuff, then we need to make a decision. Do we actually go and create those new tools that will deal with that new technology? And the answer to that lies in what's the return on investment, what's the benefits from actually doing that, and how much is it going to cost to do it. When we deal with mobile and slates, tablets, those kind of things, then emulators can be very useful. They're not everything, but they can be very useful. And you know, so it depends on the technology. Some to a greater degree. If we look at the Windows Phone Mango release that's on its way, the development tools comes with an emulator, and that emulator allows you to actually accelerate the device and make sure that the device responds to that appropriately, or the application. And it also allows you to fake up GPS positions, and so you can actually put the device in different geographies and make sure, you know, if you've got a geographically sensitive application, that it responds appropriately. It's fair to note, though, in mobile technology terms, even though, you know, we've had phones and we've had smartphones for a long time now, the automation of these things is still way behind the curve. It's nowhere near ready yet. Performance tools, well, when you're dealing with mobile, then you do need certain specialist performance tools, and you know, there's some guys that are about today. I put down there Shunra as an example, but you know, you can simulate, you know, packet loss and jitter, you know, what latency, whatever it may be, you can more than likely simulate those with these tools, and so you can incorporate that into your performance testing. If it's a regular cloud-based application, then regular performance tools will probably do the job. Visual Studio's got some great performance tools in it, but if you want to move your performance effort into the cloud, then there are cloud-based performance solutions that allows you to do that performance in a scalable way, but also reduce the hardware costs and probably some of the licensing costs as well. It is fair to note, though, again, that some of these performance tools do lag behind the actual technology. If you're dealing with proprietary protocols on a project, then they more than likely won't support that particular project. And so harnesses need to be developed, you know, at the same time that the application or solution is being developed. And lastly, security tools, and it suffers exactly the same as performance tools and test automation. They tend to be behind. You know, with new technologies comes new sort of vulnerabilities and definitely challenges for the hacking community, but also opportunities for the malicious attacker. And I think that, you know, whilst we may not be able to apply all of the tools to this new technology, we can certainly test the stuff that we know about, the OS layer and the DB layer. You know, we can make sure that we apply all of our regular security testing to that, and try and make sure that we apply some good practices to the rest of it, doing vulnerability assessments and those kinds of things. And so just to conclude, tomorrow's world, the challenges come from not only the advances in the technology, but also the advances in the process, how we deal with that and how we deal with churn. Tools are only part of the solution. The thing is, it's the team, and it's the team's use of that tool that makes the solution successful. Also, how the tool can support team collaboration as well. And I think that's where, you know, solutions like Visual Studio 2010 do win out, really. Test tool vendors need to catch up. They need to get better at dealing with the new technology sooner. And if they could do that side by side, then that would be a great place to be. If you take the Mango, the phone Mango situation, both came out at exactly the same time. We had the development tools and the emulator at the same time. And a consolidated application lifecycle management tool, that's a mouthful, can help the business make informed decisions. We can, using that central repository, you know, deliver that information in a meaningful form to the customer in a timely fashion. And that's all I have time for, folks. So thank you very much, and I hope you have a good day.